Welcome, metal enthusiasts, to episode 5 of The Metal Dude Abides. Today we return to the top 100 heavy metal songs of all time, and we start from picks 70 through 61. Now again, this is a brand new podcast, 5 episodes in, so if you like what you see, please subscribe, please hit the like. And with that being said, let's start up the list. All right, starting off the list at number 70 is Gojira with Flying Whales. Now, first and foremost, I have to keep Gojira on the list. Any band that's named after my favorite childhood monster, Godzilla, has to stay. Of course, Gojira, probably the most famous and number one heavy metal band to ever come out of France. So Gojira, you get to stay. But I'm not going to keep Flying Whales, even though it is a great song with a really cool entrance before you get into the main part of the song. Really enjoy that song. However, I'm going to go all the way up to 2016. And I'm going to go to the Grammy-nominated Magma album. Now, there are two great songs that come off Magma. I would say the two best songs that Gojira ever did. Silvera, which was also nominated for a Grammy, and the one I prefer, the one I'm choosing for today's list, Stranded. Stranded is one of those great heavy metal songs. It's got a very noticeable riff, kind of a machine gun riff, followed by like yanking on the cat's tail, screaming. It really makes for a very eerie and very unique riff throughout this song. It really gives you that sense of being trapped, that sense of being, as they scream out, stranded in the dark. Very good stuff. By far my favorite Gojira album. Silvera is a great song. Flying Whales is a great song. But if the Grammys had picked Stranded, they would have been correct in this case, because it is the best song. And it comes in today at number 70, Gojira, Stranded. Now, if you've been watching these videos, you know I like to throw a curveball in here. And I noticed that the Rolling Stone has Merciful Fate at 69 and Van Halen at 68. So I'm just going to flip those two around and put Van Halen at 69. Why? Because I just have the sneaky suspicion that David Lee Roth would prefer to be in position 69. So my bad jokes aside, let's talk about Van Halen, Running with the Devil. Now, Running with the Devil is a very good song, a very popular song. It comes off their 1978 debut album, Van Halen 1. And I also am going to pick a song, but I am going to pick a different song off that same album. And I'm going to do kind of a combo style here. I'm going to pick Eruption, followed by You Really Got Me, because those two kind of go together like peanut butter and jelly. Eruption is a guitar solo intro to the song. And of course, You Really Got Me is a cover of the old Ray Davies Kinks. It is fantastic. So why did I pick this over Running with the Devil? Because this was our first introduction to the guitar legend Edward Van Halen. Eruption is special. And in 1978, Eruption was different. It would blow your mind compared to the way guitars were being played. In fact, Edward Van Halen, I don't think gets the credit he deserves. Sometimes you hear people say, Eddie Van Halen sounds just like all the other guitarists of the 80s. And they are incorrect. All the other guitarists in the 80s sounded like Eddie Van Halen. Because Van Halen changed music. Van Halen changed the way guitars were being played. And in an entire decade, and I would say even farther into that, guitarists started emulating Eddie Van Halen, and the modern or innovative ways that he was approaching the instrument. I'm not a guitar player by trade, so I may get my terms wrong, but he was really the first one to go up on the frets and do the tapping techniques that just unleashed so much more sound out of the guitar. And again, everybody started playing guitar that way. You rarely see a single performer have that big of influence. You may say, you may have your list of favorite guitarists, you may have your list of best guitarists, but if at the very least you would have to agree that Eddie Van Halen was one of the most innovative guitarists. Van Halen is fantastic. Again, maybe a little bit of a debate on this is hard rock or heavy metal. We touched on that in the first video. But I would remind people that Van Halen was the main event at the US Festivals, Heavy Metal Day. So they've always been part of the heavy metal family, and I believe they belong on this list. In fact, if we're really being upfront and honest, Van Halen, the only thing that I struggle with this pick is that I can only pick one Van Halen song. They probably should be on this list more than once, as their first 4 albums were chock full of fantastic songs. But since I am limited to one, I'm going to throw out the combo at number 69, Eruption. You Really Got Me. All right, coming in at number 68 is Merciful Fate with Evil. Merciful Fate is a big underground band from the 80s. They have the iconic lead singer King Diamond, famous for his falsetto crooning. But I'm going to go in a slightly different direction here because there is a singer and a band that I really want to highlight on this list, because I believe this is one of those undiscovered gems in heavy metal history. And that gem is the album Animal House by Udo from 1987. Now, Udo Dirkschneider is a very interesting case study in that he was the original lead singer for Accept and had been with them for their first 7 albums. But for whatever reason, the band decided they weren't going anywhere and unleashed one of the more unusual stories in heavy metal history, because they decided to sack their lead singer. And that's not highly unusual. We see lead singers being fired from bands all the time. But they also decided that the album that they were working on, they didn't want to pursue either. So when they got rid of Udo, they said, hey, look, no hard feelings. You can even have the material we were working on for the album, go forth and prosper. They went on to hire David Reese and release Eat the Heat in 1989, and it was a major flop. Meanwhile, Udo Dirkschneider, taking the material that Accept gave him, went out, formed his own band. I say Udo, but it is probably technically UDO, and produced this album, again, 1987's Animal House. It is a perfect album. Every song on this album is fantastic. And you leave yourself wondering, was Accept on the verge of something really great when they fired Udo? Because when you look at the albums, Eat the Heat compared to Animal House, there's really no comparison. Of course, Accept would only have David around for one album, and then they would reunite with Udo, probably because they started to realize that they had probably given away a great deal of valuable material. Now, in this great album, Udo does a ballad, and Udo's not the best singer in the world, technically speaking, but when he does a ballad, the emotion that he puts into those lyrics and that song is amazing. The song is called In the Darkness. If you've never heard this song, I think people sometimes get the wrong idea with ballads. We talked about this in our last video. When a heavy metal band does a ballad correctly, it should be dark. It should pull on your heart. This song does all of those things. At one point, in almost desperation, Udo's crying out, "My heart is so cold. my heart is so cold. It's chilling, and it really sweeps you into the emotion of the song. I've loved this song for, 3 decades. I think it's his best ballad. And again, for Udo, who doesn't put out many ballads, it is also very different. So in the midst of all these great heavy songs, I'm going with the ballad here. At number 68, Udo, In the Darkness. Coming in at number 67 is Korn with the song Blind. Now, if you've been following along on the channel a while, you have already probably started to realize I'm not really a fan of nu metal. There are exceptions. I think there's one coming up next video, as a matter of fact, that is definitely considered nu metal. But for the most part, I'm a hard pass on the nu metal. So Korn, not a fan. You're out. And in their place, I'm going to put a band that has to be on this list. They are the predominant power metal band in the history of heavy metal. Of course, I'm talking about Manowar, a band that never quite got the accolades maybe in the United States, but has become a worldwide phenomenon due to, again, their fantastic power metal, tremendous vocals. This band is worthy of their worldwide fame. And in 2002, they put out a song called Warriors of the World United. Now, this was a little bit tough for me, and I'm going to put this song on the list. It's not my favorite Manowar song. That song belongs to Violence and Bloodshed. But when we talk about Manowar, Warriors of the World United is one of those trademark songs that's really hard to get away from. Whenever they are in concert, that's the song that the fans sing along to. That's the song that people embrace. That's the song that people relate to Manowar. So that's the song we're going to go with here. Manowar has a ton of different great songs. Again, it's a pity that they're only on this list once. Again, I would put Violence and Bloodshed on there as well, among many other songs. A great band. And when you look at a top 100 list, you cannot do that without having Manowar on there, because again, they have been a mainstay in the heavy metal movement for 4 decades and are still bringing it. So, coming in at number 67, Manowar, Warriors of the World United. Now, coming in at number 66 on the Rolling Stone Top 100 Heavy Metal Songs of All Time, Quiet Riot with Bang Your Head. Now, if you were around in the early 80s and you had MTV, you know how big Quiet Riot was. They had an album, Mental Health, that had this song, and their even probably more famous, more popular song, the Slade cover, Come On, Feel the Noise. I liked this band. I have this album. Enjoyed it quite a bit in its day, but I don't think it's top 100 material. Instead, I'm going to replace it with a band from a similar era. One of my favorite bands of all time, Y&T, short for Yesterday and Today. And I'm going to go to their 1983 Mean Streak album and pull out this wonderful ballad, Midnight in Tokyo. Now, Y&T is one of those interesting bands that came along and had great album after great album, and then I think due to record industry pressures, then kind of decided we're not getting anywhere, we need to have a hit song, and so they kind of broke in a commercial manner right after this album, and kind of never really regained the greatness that was in their early days. But if you catch some of the early Y&T albums, Mean Streak, Black Tiger, etc., you'll find a great band. Dave Meniketti is probably one of the greatest singer-guitarists of all time. His voice is fantastic. It is unique. It is perfect for the type of music that they play. And Midnight in Tokyo, again, I'm gonna preach about ballads this whole episode. It appears it's so passionate. It is got such a great emotional feel to it that builds to a great crescendo. I've always loved this song. They've got some great bangers too, like the title track Mean Streak, Black Tiger, Hurricane. So if you're looking for something a little faster from Y&T, look through the collection, especially through their early works. You're going to find plenty of those. But I'm going with the ballad again, coming in at number 66, Y&T, Midnight in Tokyo. All right, coming in at number 65 is King's X with Over My Head. I enjoy King's X. My roommate back in the day really liked King's X, so we listened to them quite a bit. Pretty good, kind of a progressive band, if you will. Really good vocals. Liked them quite a bit. But again, I don't think they're top 100 material. Instead, again, I'm going with a band from that era, The Cult. And from their epic 1989 Sonic Temple album, Surprise, I'm going with another ballad. I must have been in a mood when I was putting this list together. Edie, Ciao, Baby. Now, a couple things to note about this song. It is about, Edie is the girlfriend of Andy Warhol, who tragically committed suicide. This is a song about her life and kind of the question of why with someone who has everything that she had, why in the world would she commit suicide? So it's a dark topic, but it's also a very intriguing one. It is a beautiful song. It has a great breakdown in the middle of it. It has great crescendos in it. It has strings in it. There's something about heavy metal and strings, man. You put those two things together, and it's just beautiful. The Cult was a huge band back in the day. They had a couple of really great albums. You could probably pick quite a few songs from there. Songs, again, much like we talked about in our last pick, there's some songs that really move. Love Removal Machine just jumps to the top of that list for me. But this ballad, again, will really pull at you. It's got so much emotion. Again, it's a bit of a dark topic, but it is powerful. And they pull it off beautifully. So, coming in at number 65, The Cult, Edie, Ciao, Baby. All right, coming in at number 64 is Type O Negative, Black Number 1. Now, I am a sucker for heavy metal vampire bands, but I'm going to reveal something about myself. I probably shouldn't, but my favorite heavy metal vampire band of all time is a band by the name of Vamps. Not the Vamps, just Vamps. This Japanese supergroup, really, I kind of stumbled upon them by accident. I was at a concert for another band. Vamps happened to come on, and the next thing I know, I'm walking out of the arena going, I'm in love with some Japanese vampires. This is ridiculous. If you want to check them out, check out their 2017 Underworld album as a start. But they've got every album they've ever done is fantastic in my book. Now, the reason I bring them up is because for number 64, I'm going with maybe the greatest Japanese heavy metal band to come over to the States, and that's Loudness. And they have kind of that signature song off the 1985 Thunder in the East album, Rock and Roll Crazy Nights. Loudness is one of those underrated bands that you will may not have heard of. They came over in the early 80s and put out a couple of albums that were really good, really popular. But much like what we talked about in the 80s, Loudness kind of loses themselves a little bit over here in the States as they're trying to find that formula for that hit song that their record label is probably pressuring them to do. And in fact, when they go back, the grunge movement hits and all the record companies just kind of get rid of all their heavy metal acts. Loudness was no exception to that. They get sacked by the record company. They go back over to Japan and they start putting out more heavier stuff like they did in their early days. So if you liked Loudness in the States, and then kind of lost track of them when they went back to Japan. Highly, highly recommend going in and looking at some of the material they did when they returned to Japan. They have probably the greatest guitar you've never heard of, greatest guitarist you've never heard of. I'll repeat that so I say it correctly. And I'm going to read his name because Akira Takasaki. This guy shreds on the guitar. And I think when you look at all the great heavy metal Japanese music coming out today, my guess is loudness was a big influence on all of that. So coming in again at number 64, Loudness, Rock and Roll Crazy Nights. Now coming in at number 63 on the Rolling Stone list is Blue Cheer with Summertime Blues. A really good song. Again, we're going back in the 60s, a little bit before, heavy metal was even a thing. This is an okay song. Many people do credit this, I think incorrectly, but many do credit it as being the first heavy metal song. I disagree. I don't think we have that true first heavy metal song till 1970 when Black Sabbath shows up on the scene. But, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm not going to leave this song on the list, pioneering as it was, because I'm going to go all the way forward 20 years to 1988 and a very underrated band by the name of King Cobra. And their album, King Cobra 3, is a really underrated album. And the song I'm going to pick, although there's quite a few to choose from off this album, is the song Mean Street Machine. Now, I'm not a game player by trade, but I understand that this song was used in the Grand Theft Auto video games and has gained a little bit of notoriety through that venue. But King Cobra, unfortunately, again, lack of support from their record label, whatever, this was the original King Cobra. They were doing well. And after this album, they kind of broke up because they just weren't getting anywhere. And I can probably see what their beef was. This was an absolutely great album. Yes, it's heavy, but it's also very commercially accessible. It should have been a hit, and it wasn't. And that probably discouraged the band. So this was kind of their farewell song, but what a farewell it was. Mean Street Machine, Red Line, there's a number of songs that really cook on this album. We've been, inundating you with this episode with ballads. This is fast, it's heavy, really catchy. Check it out. King Cobra coming in at number 63 with Mean Street Machine. All right, coming in number 62 on the list is Sleep with Dragonaut. I'm not going to keep this artist on the list. Instead, I'm going to our only Danish band on the list that I'm aware of, Volbeat. Now, I'll admit, transparency the key here, I was a little late to the Volbeat party. I didn't really discover Volbeat till about 2013 on their Outlaw Gentlemen and Shady Ladies album. But I love that album. It's one of the greatest heavy metal albums of all time. I loved it so much I started perusing through their catalog and went back in time to the year 2008 and the Guitar Gangsters and Cadillac Blood album for the song we put on the list today. Coming in at number 62 from Volbeat, Still Counting. This song is fantastic. It has one of the greatest breakdowns in the history of heavy metal. It's heavy, and it has one of the all-time lines in the history of heavy metal. If there's a song in this list that is both heavy and also makes me chuckle every time, it's Still Counting, with the classic line, counting all the assholes in the room. Well, I'm definitely not alone. At the time, I was having some trouble with some of my coworkers. My boss was a real piece of work, and this song got me through a lot of staff meetings, let me tell you, because I would be sitting there humming this song in my head and chuckling at all the nonsense that was going on around me. So not only was this a great heavy metal song, not only does it make me chuckle, but it was also very therapeutic for all the issues I was having at work. Volbeat's a great band. They need to be on this list. Again, they have a string of hits you go with in a variety of different directions here. But there is a special place in my heart for this song, coming in at number 62, Volbeat, Still Counting. Finally, our last selection of this video, coming in at number 61, Rolling Stone goes with Arch Enemy, We Will Rise. I like Arch Enemy quite a bit. I've seen them in concert a couple times with their newest lead singer. They put on a great show. If they're in your town, go out and check them out. However, there is a band out there that I've also seen several times in concert that I think is a little bit better. And that band is In This Moment. Maria Brink is one of the best front women in heavy metal, and she has a fantastic backing band. Now, when I went to select the song, it was a little difficult. And if you go way back to episode 2, where we talked about things going on with Parkway Drive, In This Moment has a newer song off their 2020 Mother album called The In Between. And originally, when I put this list together, that's the song I went with. But much like the Parkway Drive situation, I started to realize probably recency bias might be creeping in here. And it may not be wise to put a song in that's so fresh and so new, unless, it's been out at least 5 years, the whole Hall of Fame argument. So instead, I went with my favorite song prior to The In Between, and a song that's way back in 2014. So, hey, we've had almost a decade to enjoy this one. This comes off the Black Widow album, and it's called Big Bad Wolf. Very similar to Still Counting. This song kind of cracks me up because, it brings us back to our childhood Three Little Pigs story, and it is heavy. It is catchy. I love Maria Brink. I love In This Moment, and this, I think, is, arguably their best song. So I went with that. Now, we always have these arguments, right? Do you go with their most popular song, their trademark song, if they have one, or do you go with your personal favorites? We talked about this with Manowar. We talk about this all the time. Loudness, a lot of great songs, but they're really known for Rock and Roll Crazy Nights. Is that what you go with? And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. Now, sometimes a band's signature song, it's easy to go away from it because you don't like it. It's so funny. As much as I like In This Moment, I've, and again, seen them in concert several times, their big grand finale, their big crescendo, is the song Whore, where she gets into the dunce cap and she gets up behind the podium and they do the whole thing. The crowd goes crazy. If there's one song I don't like from In This Moment, it's Whore. And that's kind of their signature song. So in this case, this was an easy one. Big Bad Wolf, much better, much more catchy. And so we'll finish off our list with that at 61. In This Moment, Big Bad Wolf, with an honorable mention. Maybe in a couple years, be ready for the list, The In Between. And that wraps up our video. Now, I know what you're thinking. You didn't pick one Rolling Stone song in this entire 10. Nope, sure didn't. I think my taste and Rolling Stone's taste at this point are pretty diverse, as we've now gone through 40 songs. And I think I've only selected kept 4 of the Rolling Stone songs on there. But heads up, we're starting to get closer to the big 50. Maybe we're going to start seeing a little bit more of an agreement between me and the Rolling Stone. So tune in next Tuesday and see if the Rolling Stones can knock a few out. In the meantime, again, brand new channel. Really appreciate if you can subscribe. Really appreciate a like. And that way you'll be alerted to next week's video coming out next Tuesday. So in the meantime, this is the Metal Dude saying have a great week, take care, and I'll see you next Tuesday.